To create this Apple toggle animation in Cavalry, we need two elements, a base and a circle. To create the base, we can first start off by adding a rectangle and sizing it up to 390 by 235. Then increasing the corner radius to half of its height, which you can do by the following. Now, all of this is done so that we can later animate it like so. Now, once you've done that, we can go ahead and fill the color in with some green. In this case, we're using this color code right here. And before moving on to the next shape, we can go ahead and add a filter called inner shadow. Right now it's very strong, and in motion design it's important to not overdo things since good design often goes unnoticed, so reduce that a bit. And we're now done with the base and can move on to the circle. To create this, well, we need to add a circle and then color it white, and we can now do a few adjustments. First of all, I like to scale it down a bit by setting the radius to something like 97.5, and then we need to, of course, change the position so it's not in the center. I set it at 77.5 for this animation. Now, it looks a little flat right now, so you can go ahead and add a filter, not inner shadow, but drop shadow for this one. And for this one, you can change the offset to 0 and -3. And once we're done with that, we can now finally animate it. To do this, we need to change the position of this ellipse shape right here. So we can go ahead and move the playhead maybe 20 frames ahead so that we don't start immediately. Then we can set the keyframe to a position of -77.5 and then move it maybe 40 frames ahead, and then just simply remove this minus to sort of mirror its position. Now we have an animation, but first let's go ahead and set the frame rate to 60. And playing the animation, we can see it's completely linear and very unnatural. And we can fix that by selecting all keyframes and then going into the graph editor to add some Bezier key interpolation. And what we can do here is change the handles here until we get something more natural that eases in and eases out, sort of like in the real world. And playing this animation, we can see it's good, but we can utilize this animation technique where we sort of overshoot the animation so that it sort of moves past the final state and then goes back. And that gives this nice effect, but we still don't have any color change. So let's fix that by adding a color blend layer. Now what this will do is it will change the output of the color based on what strength we're giving. So for example, on 100%, we can set it to this green color we used before, and then on the 0%, we can change it to a gray color, in this case, this hex code. And now it will change the output depending on the strength. So we can connect that up to the rectangle shape's fill color. And now you'll see that by just changing this slider, we get a nice transition between the two states. However, I feel like I actually just wanted to change in one frame. We can do that by setting the frame to 40, then adding a keyframe at 0%, then moving it to frame 41, and then just setting it to 100%. And why exactly frame 40? Well, that's because that's where the speed of the animation is the highest, so it sort of becomes seamless, like a match cut. Next up, we can add some motion blur to the ellipse shape here, and we can play the animation and you'll see no motion blur. That's because you have to enable it right here. And once you've done that, you'll see a subtle motion blur that sort of emphasizes this physical button's velocity. And again here, it's important to not overdo the motion blur. And the standard amount is good for this project, and we can also enable the motion blur for the other base rectangle here, since we're also going to move that soon as well. Now, once you're done with that, we can take a look at the layers here and see they're a little cluttered. So we can go ahead and group some of these things together. And that's also one of the tips I have, is that you can sort of try to keep these things organized by, for example, grouping them like we're doing here. And in this case, it's also necessary since we need to animate the whole group. And we do that by, first of all, going to maybe frame 40, and then we can go ahead and add a keyframe at its position X. Then we can maybe move a couple keyframes ahead. Let's do 12 keyframes ahead. And then we can move the position here to maybe 5, just a subtle amount. And then we can move a little further ahead, maybe to frame 61 in this case I did. And you can just go ahead and reset the position back to 0. Now, Once you've done that, you can go ahead and select all keyframes and hit Shift 1 to add a slow in, slow out magic easing. And you can see the difference between linear here and then slow in, slow out. And that'll give this nice overlapping action, as you call it, where certain elements move at a different pace than others. Now, I decided to try and change the easing here of the animation just to see what different effects we can get. And this is really just up to you in terms of what you want to give of a message to the viewer. Now, if you enjoyed the video, you might like this one on the screen next.